Okay, hopefully that's given people enough time to see the email and jump on. So thank you for coming along this evening. My name is Simon Schofield. I'm hosting this webinar on behalf of Summix, and we are joined by a range of people from the project team this evening. Hopefully you received our newsletter through the post or have found out about this online. This is a public consultation webinar for Summix's proposals for land off Spring Hill in New Arley. So just a few introductions and housekeeping. We have a range of speakers here tonight from different specialisms to hopefully answer your various questions this evening. So as I said, my name is Simon. I work for Marengo Communications. So we are carrying out the public consultation on behalf of Summix. We're joined by Arley Malik and Harry Beveridge of Summix, Cameron Ostenfeld of RPS, who is helping us with the planning, Silke Gruner from Iceni Projects, who is helping with ecology and landscape, Bucky Alanian from Odyssey, who will be speaking to drainage, Ryan Cogan from Odyssey, who will be speaking to highways and transport, Andrew Needham, who will be speaking to the master plan. So if you have any questions tonight, please do use, if you look to the bottom right hand corner of your screen, you should see questions, and you should be able to click post question there, type a question in and answer it, or rather send it. Please feel free to ask questions at any point as they arise. We will be pulling them together and putting them to the panel at the end. Also use that questions tab. If there are any technical issues, we will try and get on them and get them fixed whilst the webinar is still live. If you do have any questions after tonight, or if we don't have time this evening to answer your questions, then please do drop us an email. So that email is there. It's info@summixnewarley.co.uk. I will now hand over to Arley Malik to briefly introduce Summix.
Hi everyone, good evening. So my name's Arley Malik. I'm a development director at Summix. Summix has been operating since 2006, and we're proud to have delivered with our partners thousands of new homes, student accommodation, employment developments across the UK. Master planning, landscaping, placemaking is one of the core principles within Summix when we look at all our development sites. I'm just going to show you some of our sites in the local area that we've been working on. So one of the sites, which is in Tamworth, is Rush Lane. Rush Lane was granted outline planning permission in September 24. This was a employment site for 23,000 square meters of employment, and it was in keeping with kind of the area and the character of that particular area in terms of other employment uses as well. Moving on. Browns Lane, another site in Tamworth. This was for 210 affordable new homes. This was kind of like a logical extension to the northern edge of Tamworth, and this was granted outline permission in 2024. This site is now currently under construction and is underway. And our final site, just to give you a bit of a showcase of some of the things that we do. This is Worcestershire Parkway. This is one of our flagship developments. This site is over 10,000 new homes or dwellings. It's a new settlement. We've been working with a government agency, Homes England, for a number of years now. We're a trusted collaborating partner with Homes England. And just recently, this site was announced as one of the 12 new towns by the government, reflecting its strategic importance. And what we're currently doing right now on this particular site is we are preparing a planning application for 5,500 dwellings, and we hope to have this application in by the end of this year. That hopefully gives you a bit of a kind of flavour of Summix, and happy to answer more questions later on about the business and what we do. But now if I just pass you on to my colleague Cameron, who will talk about housing need. Cameron?
Hi, good evening everyone. Cameron Ostenfeld, I'm a planning director at RPS. Before we sort of get on to some of the site-specific slides, I think what I wanted to sort of talk to you first about is why we're here and why there is a need for housing in North Warwickshire. So just drawing the focus out for a short while, I think it's important to understand the context and the nature of planning policy at the moment. The government have currently sort of prescribed a housing target for meeting 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years. That sits within a statutory framework of planning and a need to deliver this growth through not only planning policy but local plans and through planning applications. North Warwickshire, as an authority, have an adopted plan in place, which is reaching its 5-year anniversary. They are progressing or making sort of plans for an updated plan. But reflecting on how they performed so far, we noticed in the last 4 years that there has been a shortfall against identified need. The council is struggling to maintain a forward supply of housing, and there is going to be a considerable amount of time where this is going to continue without having a plan in place. So in terms of an imperative, there's a need to ensure there is a continual supply of housing in the pipeline, and that's something the council are currently struggling with. In terms of affordable housing, I think that's quite an important part of what we're proposing and what we'll come on to talk to you about this evening. But affordable housing is perhaps an endemic issue up and down the country, and it's something, again, that we recognise is faced not only in North Warwickshire but in New Arley locally. On a borough-wide level, there are around 370 households who are currently in affordable housing need, 80 of which, according to local records, are currently in need in the Arley parish. Now, I think it's important to understand where that need is generated from. There is a clear distinction between the affordability of housing, i.e., the ability to have the wages to sort of access housing on the open market. But affordable housing is a different type of product. That's a type of product where you need to be within certain wage thresholds. You need to be on the council's housing waiting list, and that is a statutory requirement for the council to fulfil. So there is an affordable need for housing in this area, and it's an important part of what we are trying to achieve as part of this proposal in order to ensure that families who are on that list now can meet their housing needs. Kind of zooming in a little bit more about the site itself, I just thought I'd sort of talk quickly about sort of how the site sits in context. And I'm sure many of you are sort of familiar with the context of the area more generally, but I'm just looking at things from a planning perspective and how we approach a project in this settlement. And coming to the first point about how the site sits in the landscape, as many of you might know, you might well use that public right of way that sort of bifurcates the settlement, bifurcates the site in the north. But the site is an agricultural parcel of land. It's sort of surrounded by industrial land to the north, residential land to the south, and Daffins Wood to the east as well. So the site itself is not a constrained site in terms of environmental or policy designations. There's no national constraints which would otherwise render the site unsuitable for housing. We recognise that the site forms part of the wider Greenbelt, a designation that sort of sits around the whole of Arley. This itself is a policy constraint, not one of environmental constraint. So that's just an important point, I think, to reflect upon. Should New Arley grow? The council recognised New Arley as a sustainable settlement. It's identified currently as a Category 3 village, which is reflective of not only the size of the settlement, but a number of services and facilities in the village. New Arley itself is obviously different than Old Arley to the west, but collectively they have a relationship which I think gives an important sort of characteristic that defines the sustainability of this area. It is a recognised sustainable centre, and it's one where we consider that it is appropriate for new sustainable growth to come forward. Before I move on, I'm just going to sort of take you to one slide about the grey belt. As I mentioned previously, the site is currently covered by Greenbelt designation, something which has been in place for a number of years. The concept of the grey belt, it might be something you're familiar with or you might have seen on news headlines, but I think I just wanted to kind of quickly talk to you about this. This is a concept introduced by the Labour government at the end of last year. And grey belt is a concept whereby the government see it fit that as long as a number of different facets are met within a proposed scheme, there can be scenarios where development in the grey belt can be acceptable. The government here want to ensure that they're driving growth in sustainable locations, but they are driving growth that does more than local policy would expect. So whilst sort of developments can come forward, they have to commit to increased affordable housing provision. They have to demonstrate that they're giving back to the local area in terms of green spaces and public infrastructure. So effectively, they have to do more than your regular scheme, as well as demonstrating that they would not have significant adverse impacts on the green belt. So this is part of the proposal, and this is part of the scheme that we're looking to introduce into New Arley. I'll come back to speak to you on other points, but for now I'm just going to pass you over to our architect and urban designer, Andrew.
Thank you and good evening. I just want to run through some of the key principles of the design that have underpinned the sort of master plan image that you can see on the screen in front of you. An important starting point with the formulation of the design was looking at the key existing landscape and physical site features. So got the Daffodils Wood ancient woodland to the eastern boundary of the site. We've got the hedgerow and public right-of-way, which run east-west across the site. And also then we've got existing hedgerows and trees around the site periphery as well, all of which we're looking to incorporate and respect within the proposals we're putting forward. We also want to provide a sensitive response to the surrounding context. There's a number of different uses that's bordered the site. We have residential uses to the south, residential and industrial uses to the north, Daffodils Wood, as I've just mentioned, to the eastern boundary, and also a large substation to the southeastern part of the site as well. We'd look to provide suitable landscape buffers or offsets to those uses within the site itself, and in the case of Daffodils Wood, look at providing a minimum 15-metre offset, which is a national sort of policy minimum to provide. There's an ambition to open up and integrate the site as much as we can with the local area, making sure the public open space we're providing is accessible to the wider community and new residents as well. We will look at achieving this by reinforcing the public right-of-way route and upgrading that as a route across the site, and also reinforcing the connection to the north eastern corner of the site, which links from the nature reserve out through to Frederick Road, which would form part of a convenient walking link between New Arley and Old Arley as well. We'd also look at providing a new pedestrian or cycle connection to the southern edge of the site, which would reinforce a sort of key desire line between the new development and then New Arley amenities such as shops, school and the recreation ground. We would also be looking at providing 2 vehicular access points into the site. These would be from the western site boundary from Spring Hill, the primary site access being the northern of the 2 arrows on the screen there. So the 2 purple arrows are the vehicle access points, and the more northerly one of the 2 would be the principal access of vehicles into the site. In terms of the accessibility and thinking of topography, as I'm sure many of you will be aware, there's quite a steep slope in places on the site itself, sloping from south to the north. And what we've looked at doing with the framework here is providing a network of streets and connections that are accessible and work with the gradients of the site to provide an accessible and user-friendly sort of gradients for site users, and avoiding any sort of steep hills or slopes within the site itself. Public open space we're looking to provide is an integrated network of green space throughout the master plan. I think there's just a touch over 3 hectares of space in total, and this would basically be a variety of different space typologies. There would be additional accessible space alongside the public right-of-way and also alongside the edge of the woodland. We'd also be providing a new central sort of parkland space at the middle of the plan, and also the other opportunities available would be for things like allotments and also a community orchard space as well. In terms of drainage, we're looking at providing 2 sort of fairly large attenuation pond features to the northern edges of the site. These are the lowest points of the site, so naturally this is where the site will drain towards. These will deal with the surface water on the site. They also will make for very nice landscape features within the overall green space, as well as performing a function in terms of drainage. In terms of play spaces, there's going to be a provision of play spaces distributed across the site within the open space as well, and there will be a range of different typologies for different age groups of children. With the sort of lighter brown coloured areas on the master plan image on the screen, these are the development areas that we've designed within the scheme. We will be able to achieve around 250 homes at a comparable density to New Arley, so in keeping with the local sort of grain and density of New Arley itself. And of those new homes, we'd be looking at providing 50% affordable dwellings. And I believe if I pass over to the next slide, there'll probably be more discussion around the housing and the tenures.
Thanks, Andrew. Just back to me on this one. I thought I'd just talk a little bit about the process, and then perhaps I can pick up on some of those points. I think for those perhaps who haven't been ingratiated in the planning process at all, I think it's just worth reflecting on the type of application that we're preparing. So there are a number of different ways an application can be submitted to a local authority. One would be sort of the full detail of an application, including the principle, the details of the design, the materials, all the elements you'd expect to see, which would get you to seeing a completed development on the ground. The route that we are adopting for this proposal, which is a very common route to take, is an outline planning application. So this would mean that we are seeking consent from the council for the overall parameters of the scheme, the outline, as you will. So the the approximate amount of development and the kind of development that this site could bring forward. The only matters that would be sort of taken in terms of detail would be the vehicular access arrangements to ensure we have safe access and egress onto the site. So the outline application that we're preparing would be submitted alongside a full suite of technical documents to demonstrate to the council that this is an acceptable location on which to see future housing. And the development itself would be planned up to, as Andrew mentioned, around 250 or currently 252 dwellings. So that's an up to figure, and that's the figure the council will be adopting as part of our proposals, as part of our development description. So in terms of the process, we're currently working on a planning application which we intend to submit to the council end of this year. So this process is important because it helps us sort of work through not only technical considerations, but local information that perhaps we might not have been able to gather, or we might not have the benefit of knowing, having not lived in the locality. So part of this process would mean that we'll take on board as much of the information as we can. We'll still have the opportunity to feed that into our submission, and then that will be taken to the district council for determination. Their process would, once validated, take the application through a 13-week determination window, at which point, if they consider that they have enough information, they will either take it to a planning committee or delegate it by local officer recommendation. So hopefully that gives a bit of an indication to you just in terms of the timeline. We are clearly welcoming as much input as we can during the pre-submission stage, but just to be completely clear, once this gets submitted to the council, there will again be an opportunity to formally comment not only on the proposals, but all the technical submissions that will be before you. Touching on Andrew's point about the type of housing we're proposing, I think, as I mentioned, we are seeking an outline scheme, so we're looking to commit to up to 252 housing. The thing that we will commit to is the provision of affordable housing, the 50% figure. Now, in terms of the type of housing that could come forward, we're very much going to be guided by the council in terms of what they think is appropriate, what is required for this particular area, and that itself will be secured by a planning condition attached to the decision if the council decide to approve this scheme. The one thing I think that we can sort of take that sort of greater certainty of is the affordable housing. And I think it's at this point perhaps just worth reflecting that there are different affordable housing products, and it all relates really to the locally identified need, whether that is people on the housing register for rented housing, whether that's people on the housing register for shared ownership housing. We're very much guided by the discussions that we're going to be having with the council to ensure that the proposals can be secured in the right way. I'll just move on, if I can, onto open space, landscaping and ecology, passing to my colleague Silke Gruner. Thank you.
Good evening. This slide shows an illustration of what the proposed open space could be. The layout of the scheme and the new open spaces has been designed to retain the existing structural vegetation and to protect the existing mature trees and vegetation along the boundary. And then the green infrastructure and public open spaces have been weaved through the houses to provide access to green open spaces to all the new residents and within close proximity to their houses. The proposed development will create a variety of public open spaces, and they will be accessible to new and existing residents. They will be varied in the types of open spaces and their characters. And again, that will be designed to meet the council's open space standards and their requirements. New open spaces that we're proposing will include, but it's not limited to at this stage, we're looking at new equipped play areas for children, new natural play spaces, allotments, community orchard. We also look to provide off-road walking routes, which will link to the existing public right-of-way and the wider right-of-way network. We'll also design wild spaces for nature, so where the focus is really biodiversity specifically. We are proposing to make a contribution towards the enhancement of other existing open spaces within New Arley, and we're particularly thinking about potentially youth provision at Gun Hill Recreation Ground. The scheme proposes to create new habitats, a variety of new habitats, and that will deliver at least 10% biodiversity net gain to the site. Some of the things that we're including is a new sensitive woodland edge along Daffins Wood. We're proposing new areas of pollinator-friendly meadow and grassland planting. There will be new native tree planting, hedgerows and scrub, as well as a variety of wetland habitats associated with the drainage system. We also propose to incorporate native orchids within the design of the scheme in the landscaped areas. And this will all be coupled with street trees along the new roads.
Sorry, it's probably me to jump in there. My name is Ryan. I'm an associate transport planner at Odyssey. Essentially, in terms of the surveys that we're looking at relevant to transport and the forthcoming proposals, so far we've carried out automatic traffic counts, or ATCs, along Spring Hill. These ATCs essentially will pick up speed data in both directions and the number of vehicles that travel along this route. Additionally, we've also undertaken manual classified counts, or MCCs, of a number of local junctions. This enables us to determine the baseline traffic flows in the local area, as well as how traffic distributes locally. These MCC surveys, they enable us to determine whether there are any current issues on the network and whether the network has the relevant capacity to accommodate the forthcoming proposals. As part of our assessment, safety is obviously very important to us. We've done our own reviews of the local highway network, and we'll be looking at potential highway improvements on the local road network as well. This, by all means, isn't an exclusive list, but we've looked at options such as giveaway, road narrowing, and alterations to speed limits. Ideally, we'd look at tying these highway improvements in with improving the pedestrian experience in and around the proposed development. At the moment, we are looking to discuss these potential improvement options with the county council, and they'll be set out within our forthcoming transport reports. Sort of linking back to the last section on surveys, the site would also provide two vehicular accesses, as Andrew touched on earlier, along Spring Hill. These would naturally slow down the traffic. The main access would be located between the Spring Hill junction with Stonehouse Lane and Collier's Way to the north. So in terms of public transport network, owing to the site's rural location, we've identified that the existing public transport options are particularly limited, owing mainly to local bus services as well. What is good is that all future residents at the site would be within 400 metres of the existing bus stops along Spring Hill. allowing them access to local services as well as school services as well. However, we do know that the existing public transport infrastructure is lacking, both in terms of service frequency, with services generally running once every hour or more, and the bus stop infrastructure along Spring Hill is something we would explore in terms of improvements as well. Active travel, yeah, so this has been touched on by a few of my colleagues. Active travel will obviously be a key part of the forthcoming proposals, and is something that we'll seek to improve. Initial discussions have already been held with the council, who are obviously very keen to see active travel improvements as well, with regard to walking and cycling. Further consultation will be undertaken with the county council as well in due course. I'd also add that given the development proposals and the scale of development, more than 150 units, Active Travel England is officially a statutory consultee on the scheme, and they'll be pushing for the successful delivery of active travel and personal mobility as well. So our aim is really to improve existing pedestrian routes, such as the public right of way through the site. That generally runs in sort of a north to south orientation. Although we'd also look at creating additional pedestrian and cyclist routes in a more east-west orientation to make the site more permeable, and really hit those sort of anticipated future desire lines of where people are going to want to travel to. A real aim of ours is to improve active travel, though, not just sort of within the site, but beyond the site, trying to link the different rural areas surrounding the site together. So we really want the site to feel as though it's part of the local area and not sort of separate from that. And I should probably just touch on parking at the end, although we don't have a slide for it, but the site will provide a policy compliant level of car parking within the site, off street as well. Parking would be provided on site for all the users, so this includes disabled persons parking, visitors parking, electric vehicle charging points as well, and motorcycle parking. We'll also be providing cycle parking for each unit as well, as additional short stay cycle parking will be located throughout the site. This will be available, to all visitors and people visiting as well. I think I'll pass over to my colleague Bucky now. Yep.
Thank you, Ryan. In terms of the drainage, we are looking at a site that actually drains naturally from the south to the north, which is following the existing topography. And we're proposing a sustainable drainage system that slows water down and holds it on site before a controlled form of release. So overall, this reduces the peak runoff rate compared with the existing greenfield situation. We look to reduce the total volume of water leaving the site during major storms. In terms of the water quality, it would be improved through a treatment sequence. Typically, the swells were introduced in basins and filters before it enters the wider network. The system is also designed to avoid increasing flood risk to surrounding fields or downstreams receptors. All designs will actually follow the lead local flood authority guidance and the sustainable drainage system hierarchy principle based on the standards national criteria, design criteria or drainage criteria. We would be having maintenance, which is fairly straightforward and built into the long-term strategy so that performance stays consistent over time. Because we have what we call an attenuation system that slows the flow, the development will create more controlled drainage than the current natural field, and overall would improve the existing ditch network. It will provide a better connectivity in the area. It will have what we call exceedance routing that helps manage heavy rainfall events. I think that's pretty much a summary of what the drainage will be providing. Right now, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Simon, for consultation process.
Yes, so we're not far away from getting over to questions. So just sort of to set out how the consultation will run. Hopefully you received our newsletter through the post. We will be consulting until the 3rd of December, so please do let us know any thoughts before then. You can have your say in the ways listed here, so do please visit the website. There's more information and images available for you there. Email us at info@summixnewarley.co.uk or call us on the community helpline, which is 0800 689 5209. If you are struggling to sort of get online or you need copies of the materials to be posted to you, then please do ring that community helpline number and we will make sure you're able to access them. What will then happen is we will take on board all of the feedback. I have to write a report that will form part of the planning application, which is called a statement of community involvement. Summix will see that report beforehand, so they will be able to take on board any suggestions and consider those before finalising those plans. And the aim is to submit a planning application to North Warwickshire Borough Council before Christmas. As we explained before, this is an outline planning application, so if this is successful, there will be a further reserved matters application which will deal with more fine detail of the project. So that's the end of our speaking part. Thank you everybody who has posted questions. If you have any further questions, do please keep them coming. I will start with, we've had a number of questions through. Let's see how to start. I think the first one here was asked quite a while ago now, was how will you demonstrate enhancement to the area? And I think that was related specifically to biodiversity. So if I can throw that to you, Silke, if that's okay.
So biodiversity metric looks at what's on the site currently and it gives it a score. And then it looks at what are you proposing and it gives that another score. In order to achieve 10% BNG, you have to go 10% above your baseline score. What we propose to do is manage and retain the existing vegetation, which helps and ensures the longevity of that vegetation. We're proposing new areas of long grass and wildflower meadow, which again is very beneficial for ecology and wildlife. We're also proposing a range of scrubby vegetation, so thicket and hedgerows and native plants with berries and things like that. And they all aid in ensuring that actually the green areas on the site have more potential in terms of providing habitat, providing food and biodiversity for wildlife than a plain field has. And that is how we're designing it, and that gets given to the council in a report where we actually calculate the different biodiversity net gain areas to prove that it is being done.
Perfect, thank you very much. We've got a couple of questions on drainage, which I'll put to you, Bucky. I will read them both because they are interlinked. So the first one says, the site does have a tendency to flood and become waterlogged along the footpath along the bottom. What are your plans for remedying this? And I know you touched on that earlier, but it might be helpful to just go over that again. And the further question also linked, concerned re-drainage. The existing balancing pond close to Daffin's Wood has not been kept clear by local council in the 40+ years since Morgan Close Estate has been built. Who will maintain the new balancing ponds? The flooding is extensive at Bourne Brook, meeting with the road to the north of the site at the bottom of Spring Hill.
Okay, now thank you for the question. So as we stated, overall, the site itself currently drains naturally. And when there is rainfall or storm events, it just drains by gravity. But because of our new development, we will be introducing and putting in place some sustainable drainage system. These allows a slowing down of the water and it holds it on site and gradually just releases it in a controlled manner. And these would reduce the peak runoff during rainfall events. The site of our development is actually within flood zone 1. That means it's not at risk of any flooding currently as it sits. But you did mention the brook just up the road. In terms of because the brook is actually over for about 350 to 400 meters away from our site, is our site going to impact on the brook? Yes, in a positive way, and that's the fact that because we're slowing down overall runoff from our site, this can have some form of impact on the current flow that goes through the brook area. The balancing pond on our site, or the basins that will be on our site, will be maintained on site through the various system we've put in place, and that means we're connecting one of the basins to the local network for Severn Trent network. The other one will be going into a ditch network, which is controlled by the local flood authority, and we're speaking to them currently. So it's not different to what's happening right now, but considering the fact that we're slowing it down and we're releasing it in a controlled manner, it helps to even further improve the overall runoff in the area.
Thank you, Bucky. A few questions for you, Ryan. So the first one, I'm not convinced by your claim to support sustainable travel by putting in a cycle track. Can you expand, please? So how are we promoting sustainable and active travel?
Yeah, so I sort of touched on it earlier. That there will be the creation of sort of new routes throughout the site that are supposed to link the main areas of sort of New Arley to the site and onto Spring Hill. We know that public transport routes around the site as well aren't great. I think I saw a question get put in earlier about how the existing sort of pedestrian infrastructure sort of isn't really all there. And when we've gone to site and walked around, yeah, we've noticed that it's not completely joined up. So yeah, we'll be looking at ways of doing that. I know within the Arley neighbourhood plan, there's a real push to link New Arley with Old Arley. I think one of the main issues is the pedestrian footpath under the railway bridge. So yeah, there's a number of things that we're going to be looking at to make the pedestrian environment much better, and putting things in place where possibly there isn't already. But yeah, again, touching on cycle parking as well for active travel. Future residents are going to be given cycle parking spaces for each unit. As I said, we're going to be putting short stay cycle parking on the site as well, which hopefully encourages people in the local area to cycle through the site and can also park their bike there safely as well.
Very good. Thank you, Ryan. Next one for you as well. Are you considering the increased volume of traffic through the village the new houses will bring? Getting along Gun Hill is already a nightmare without additional traffic coming through, especially during drop-off and pick-up from the school on the main road.
Yep. So like I said, we'd undertaken surveys that have looked at local junctions in and around the site. We've identified 8 junctions, although 2 of those do include the site access junction, which we have to model. The modelling results that we've got so far show that there won't be any adverse impacts from the proposed development on those junctions. Although when this sort of scheme gets put in front of the council, they can also advise if there are any further junctions that they want us to look at, and we can model those as well.
Thank you very much. And a further question from the same person. People are not going to walk or cycle, so this part of the travel is irrelevant. You need transport to get out of the village. Buses are not regular. New residents will be coming into the village with their own vehicles, thus increasing the volume of traffic in a small village.
Yeah, so as part of our transport report, the transport assessment that we'll be putting together, we look at something that's called a multimodal trip generation. That looks at the number of trips that would be, increments from this site across walking, cycling, public transport, private car, vehicle occupants as well. So, that has identified that there will be, it's based on other sites similar to this one that have been surveyed. That's identified that there will be people walking and cycling in future. Although, I understand that private car use is going to be, very high in this area. You only have to take a look at census mode share data to know that. That's why we're trying to improve public transport services as well. So I sort of touched on that. We know that the service, the 18 and the 19, and there's several other school services as well that run along Spring Hill, sort of between key destinations to Nuneaton and also further to the south and to the west. We'll be looking at improving those services where we can, and trying to shift people to public transport as much as we can. Again, I know that it sort of links back to the question about there not being much of a sort of pedestrian network within the area. We know that there's no pedestrian footpath running along the southern side of Spring Hill. This makes access to those sort of westbound services along Spring Hill very difficult. Any sort of improvements that we will look at that are tied into public transport, we'll try and complement those services and make them more accessible as well. So essentially, we're trying to shift people away from private car use and get them onto active modes and public transport. There'll be a travel plan issued to all future residents as well, which sort of outlined what services are going to be and what those walking routes and stuff that we've identified within and around the site are going to be available to.
Thank you very much, Ryan. A few questions on infrastructure, I think, for Cameron. I won't read all of the questions, but they're on a similar theme around doctors. So I'll just read the first one that came in, is how will you support the existing doctors' surgery, which is already struggling to meet the needs of existing users? And there are a number of questions in a similar vein.
Yeah, I think it's an important point, because I think, every time you see a new development come into the area, there's going to be additional people that are going to be generated from that. We might well expect there's going to be a proportion of growth that moves from within the Arleys to the development, but I think it's realistic to expect that there's going to be a new population coming in, and that new population will bring with them development needs, whether that is need to sort of get along with the local GP, whether they have children and have educational needs, or whether there's any other facilities within that area that will be impacted as part of that development. As part of what we are doing in this game, we're engaging with the relevant sort of stakeholders as early as we practically can, and part of that process is led with the council as part of a pre-application, and part of that exercise is to try and understand from an early point of view what the likely impact will be, and that has regard to not only existing capacity but planned future capacity and where they see themselves in the next few years, whether that's a GP, school, etc. One of the important things I think to note is how that then translates into the planning process. So if there's a situation whereby your development generates a need that does not impact upon said facility, there is a need, well, there's no need to do anything. But I think more often than not, particularly with the state of kind of public sort of finances and local services, there tends to often be a need to make contributions towards various facilities. And in this case, it may well be necessary to make contributions towards the local GP for expansion, or for for works that would ensure that the development can be accommodated. Similarly, for education or highways improvements, etc., there may well be the need to secure contributions to make sure that development can be found acceptable, and that is ingrained within planning law, and there are fair tests there to ensure that contributions are made reasonably, they're linked to the development, and they're proportionate to the scale of development. Any such contributions that the council identify through the consultation process would be secured as part of a legal agreement. So there would be an agreement put in place to say that these funds would be made available to either the ICB, who are responsible for the NHS facilities in the area, or the local education authority to make the development work. So at the moment, we don't have all the answers. We don't know what the impact is going to be yet. We're working to try and get a better understanding of that, and we'll keep on engaging not only with local operators, but with the council up to and post submission.
Thank you very much. The next one related on infrastructure. Can you tell us more about what you've considered for utility improvements such as water, sewage and electrical supply? And can you tell us about what impact, it doesn't end there, but what impacts that will have?
Sorry, Simon, I wasn't sure who that was directed to.
Sorry, Cam, I thought it was to you.
Oh, no, that's fine. I thought I'd break the awkward pause there. Again, as part of our assessment, we'll be submitting the utility statement. That is an amalgamation of conversations that we've had with the various providers, whether that is, water in terms of, fresh and foul drainage, whether that is electricity connections, whether that is all of the services that effectively get into the site. Part of the exercise that Summix will be conducting is ensuring the deliverability of the site and ensuring that there is capacity and feasibility for the services to be provided. For example, at the moment there are currently electricity pylons or wires. Sorry, pylons makes it sound bigger than they are, but there are electricity cables which pass across the site. Discussions are obviously underway as to how best to deal with those. Our preference being to underground them and reroute them.
Thank you very much. These may also be for you, Cameron, or they may be for Andrew. First one I think you can answer is this is on sort of the type of housing being proposed. So do we have any images of the type of housing that's proposed?
No, we don't. As I said, this is an outline application. So at present, we're not looking to secure the detailed design of those units. As I said, there would be the appropriate safeguards put in place so that the council have the relevant control over how the design is brought forward. So what would be likely to be expect here is a condition which would require a standard of design or adherence to local design criteria. And that information, along with the types of materials, along with the color palettes, etc., would be something that you would submit as part of a next application, so a reserved matters application. Once that's submitted, you would see the detailed plots, how they would all look, how they would fit in with the street scene, and then again that would be a separate application for the council to consider and determine.
Thank you very much. I think another for you, it's two related questions, but I'll read them both together. You've stated that the scheme will include up to 50% affordable housing and that the mix of affordable tenures. Can you provide more detail on what tenure types are being proposed? Example, social rent, affordable rent, shared ownership, first homes, and the expected proportions of each, and then linked, what evidence demonstrates that this specific mix is aligned with local need rather than simply meeting percentage targets?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think to turn to that first point, whilst the figure of the total quantum, the 252, is an up to figure, what is not an up to figure is the affordable percentage. So that will be 50% of whatever that final figure will be. In terms of how that is broken down, I think, as I mentioned, we are very much guided by the council because their evidence base is evolving. It's always changing. They do have an affordable housing SPD, which was adopted some years ago, and that would serve as a bit of a starting point to work out, what our base position is. And that position is, let's consider the affordable housing component. 85% of said affordable housing would be for affordable rent, i.e. those who are on the waiting list for a rented property. 15% would be intermediary products. So whether that is a shared ownership house, i.e. you own a proportion of the house and you continue to rent, or whether that is a discounted market house, a type of product which is capped in perpetuity, less than market value. There are different products that are available, and we have to sort of start from a base position, but ultimately it's only when going through the local evidence with the council that we can kind of come to a view as to what represents the best proportion for that area. Now, coming to the council's further evidence and hopefully touching on that second point, what is the composition going to look like? Is the need local to the area? I think, as I previously identified, the council has an affordable housing waiting list. That is around 370 households on it, 80 of which are in the Arley and Whittaker ward. What we're proposing to do here is, as I said, work with the council to establish exactly what type of housing would be best sort of suited for this area. The council's evidence base from 2022 gives an understanding at a district level of the proportionate sort of house types, depending on whether it's affordable rent or affordable shared ownership product. I think it's something which is, again, a starting point, and it's really only once we engage with the council, possibly probably after submission, that we can get into the nuts and bolts of what that's going to look like. But the purpose of what we're doing is to sort of seek agreement with the council so that type of housing would be secured as part of that same legal agreement I referred to previously, should there be any contributions that are necessary.
Apologies, left myself on mute. I have a couple of questions going back to Silke on landscaping. The first one, will there be access to maintain the existing hedge that borders our property on the south side of the planned development? Who is responsible for maintaining the hedge around the perimeter of the site?
So I'm not sure exactly what property we're speaking about, and it will also depend who technically owns the hedge, so which land ownership it falls. But what we tend to do is to ensure that proposed dwellings don't back onto those hedgerows, so that you can maintain access to them, and so that they are usually located within public spaces, so you're able to get to them in order to manage it. The other thing is that in these developments, there are various ways of ensuring that the new landscaping is managed. So it can either be handed over to the council to manage and oversee all the open spaces. The other option is often a management company, so where residents pay into a service which maintains the shared open spaces. So that is usually how this is dealt with.
Thank you very much, Silke. And one more for you. What guarantees can you provide that Daffen Wood will remain protected?
So Daffen Wood is an ancient woodland, and it's protected by various planning regulations. The proposed development maintains a 15-metre buffer to the woodland, which is the standard as required, and which is what the council requests as well. And then on the development side of the woodland, we usually incorporate lots of new structural vegetation, so thicket planting, hawthorn, blackthorn, plants like that, which are quite sticky and have thorns. And that also prevents people from entering the woodland from the new development side. The woodland is the new vegetation and the existing trees and elements like that within the site will form part of the management plan as well. So the developer will provide a set of management regimes to the council, which will be agreed, and that will then be looking at especially things like the new buffer planting. But in terms of the woodland itself, it's not within the site, so we're not proposing to do anything to it. We are merely buffering it and making sure that access is not gained to the woodland.
Very good, thank you, Silke. And a related one on Daffen Woods. It's ancient woodland and the home to many different species of animals. Having the woodland circled by housing and industrial units will likely affect the wildlife activity in the woods. What are you considering in regard to the amount of species in the woodland and their needs?
So full ecological surveys have been and are continuing to be undertaken in order to ascertain which species are in there. And to ensure that specific mitigation measures are in place for every species which requires them and which may be affected by the proposed development. The other thing, of course, is by creating these green corridors that link to the existing woodland, link with a footpath, link to the existing vegetation, and lead through the new homes, that will also aid in maintaining movement corridors, and not just maintaining, but actually creating new links, new habitat corridors, where there aren't necessarily good corridors at this stage, even whilst accommodating the housing.
Thank you very much, Silke. I'm not sure who this question ought to go to. Are there plans to test the quality of the ground prior to proceeding? The industrial estate sits on the site of the old colliery, which could have leached pollution into the wider area. So talking about a contaminated land sort of study.
I think just to answer that question, I think there'll be a number of studies that we need to do, and whilst we've got a phase 1 geotechnical study, there'll be further more intrusive studies being undertaken. So they'll go to a phase 1, then there's a phase 2, which is a much more intrusive study, and that we'll be looking at that in relation to the details, the strata, and if there's any contamination and how we deal with that. So that's the way we'd approach it. So at the moment we're at phase 1. There'll be more investigation work to be done.
Thank you very much for that, Ali. A few questions on a similar theme is, what is the expected planning timeline for the development, assuming a successful consultation?
I think I'll try to answer, and maybe Cam wants to jump in, but I think there was a question about when is it likely that a start on site would happen. There's a number of things that need to go through to get to that position. Obviously, we're in very early stages, an application, lots of consultation. This is an outline planning application. If it's successful, then be reserved matters and beyond that. So there's quite a considerable amount of time to go through. There's lots of consultation, rightfully so, that is needed, that will go through that process. The likelihood is, if that all goes through, and is acceptable, I think at the very earliest, with planning and then sort of detailed design work and approvals of that detailed design work of infrastructure and then housing, at the earliest you'd be looking at, I would say, late 2028. You'd be looking at potentially a start on site. There was another question that was, how long would the development likely take? If we take the quantum of 250 homes, that's very much dependent, on the phasing of building, which is hard to determine exactly at this moment in time, but you would be looking at probably in the region of 3 to 5 years to complete something like this in this size of development.
Thank you very much. Related to construction, there's a number of questions here. They are linked. What noise, dust and traffic mitigation measures will be in place during construction? And linked, what will be done to safeguard pedestrian safety near the site during construction?
This isn't particularly linked to sort of an outline planning application, but when it becomes more of a detailed application, I know that we'd be required to submit construction logistics plans or construction management plans. There's a construction environmental management plan as well, which sort of touches on dust, noise, traffic as well. They all have different acronyms, but for the most part, essentially mean the same thing. This is a report that will be produced. There'll be an assessment of the site in terms of construction traffic and construction safety. This will be done sort of in outline by ourselves as transport consultants. And then this goes on towards a contractor that's appointed much further down the line. Essentially, this becomes a bit of a live document that gets sort of updated as the scheme goes on, and more is found out about the sort of construction methodology, the construction timeline and program. Again, there will be a chance to sort of consultation period on that as well. I assume there'll be things such as letter drops that go around, and people will be able to voice their opinion on that. These plans will be in place further down the line, but to ensure, obviously, pedestrian safety. I think there was one again, wasn't there, a question about sort of construction traffic. That this will be modelled, and when it comes to it, and when that construction traffic is known, that'll be added to the network over sort of a period of time that the construction program is going to last as well.
Thank you very much. We are running short on time. I think we've got time for one more question. The industrial estate on Collier's Way, it operates 24/7 and emanates noise throughout the night as well as during the day. What consideration is being taken in regards to this? I think is that you, Cameron?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I can take that. I think, as sort of echoed by Ali, the application will be supported by a number of technical reports, and one of those will be looking at the associated amenity of the development, not only what the development impact will have, but the impact from the development from the surrounding area. So those assessments will look at sort of noise, air quality, all the things that you would expect to sort of see whether or not there are any impacts which would have a material impact on the site, and ultimately, that is informing, or that's going to sort of impact upon how we bring the design forward. Whether that means, for example, there is a need for a particular buffer or a standoff from the estate, whether there's a need for screening or vegetation, whether there's a need, for example, for controls to be put in place. All of the evidence base effectively will be fed into the output of the application. But it's a valid question to ask, and again, it's useful to have that local intelligence. Thank you.
Very good. One final question. I think if you can pick this up as well, Cameron, that would be helpful. Why is this application being advanced ahead of the council's local plan review and without community-led master planning?
Yeah, okay. I think the government wants to see a network of up-to-date local plans in place. I think that is where they want to see the future of planning going. But at present, the council have a plan which is less than 5 years old. But as I mentioned, that plan is failing to deliver. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be a number of months, if not years, actually, until the council have another plan in place. And I guess you've got to ask the question about, well, what happens in that interim period? The housing need isn't going away. The houses that the council are expected to deliver are simply not going to come forward as expected. And in that time, you're going to have a further shortfall in housing numbers, and you're going to have a further shortfall in the delivery of affordable housing, something the council has struggled to do until now. So the government sort of expect, or the government sort of encourage, the planning system to be responsive to failures in the local plan process. And in this context, there is sort of a sequence of events that you can follow to ensure that development can come forward to plug the gaps. And it can't be development anywhere. It can't be development that is unsustainable. But if it's done in the right place, and if it sort of achieves the right aims, then that is something that national policy would allow for. So I would also note that we're not sort of completely divorced from the local plan process. We have been engaging with policy officers, for a number of months to try and let them know what we're doing to promote the site through the emerging plan. But as of yet, the plan hasn't advanced sufficiently. I am aware that there may well be a consultation draft of a local plan coming out in the next few weeks, albeit what I would say is that is a very initial stage of plan making. There's a number of steps that need to get through until a document can be found sound and taken forward by the council. And I think there has to be that sort of pragmatic response to supply issues in the interim, which we are hopefully trying to address.
Thank you very much for that answer, Cameron. And I think we've now run over time. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get to all of your questions. There have been quite a large number of them asked. If you would like your question answered, please do email info@summixnewarley.co.uk, and we will come back to you as soon as we can. Thank you very much for your time this evening, and we do hope that you found this event useful. Thank you. Take care. Good night.